And then when you're at that next stage, I actually hadn't thought about the chakra stage, but yes, you're moving into the heart. And the heart is the transitional chakra, where it's not just about me, myself, I. It's more, why am I? How am I? And why am I here? And I think there's that little voice within that maybe just starts to make itself heard a little bit more. The inner world, the alchemical sort of, massive cosmos of, our inner space. And you start to hear questions or ask yourself questions about, what is my life about? Why am I here? Who am I? Why am I? And those are really big questions that we can often spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out.
Yes. Yes. And perhaps it is some knowing from our higher selves of our purpose here. And it's just like the inkling of that. The
Yes.
door opens.
Yes.
Are we brave enough to walk through?
But I'm much more interested in finding the special and nurturing energies, the earth energies, the mystical side, reconnecting us to our true roots and living in alignment with the nature beings, the elemental world. That sense of joy and delight from my childhood. Big fan of gnomes, and I've mentioned dragons, fairies, the little people under the hill. Just that unseen, hidden to most of us, but very magical otherly world, the interdimensional space where we can connect with those energies, whether we see, feel, sense, hear those energies, and how we can support each other, how we can work as teammates, if you like.
Welcome to the Enchanted Earth podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own.
Well, hello, everybody. Did you know that this podcast was inspired by my book, The Enchanted Earth? I will put the links so you can purchase your own down below. So welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Alex Russell Stoneham, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a Cornwall-based dowser with more than 40 years experience exploring earth energies, sacred geometry, and subtle relationships between people and landscape. She's co-chair of the Tamer Dowsers in the UK, helps run the Earth Energy Group, and is host of the Discovering Dowsing podcast, where she explores how dowsing can support awareness, healing, and deeper connection. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much, Maureen. It's lovely to be here.
And it looks like a sunny day for both of us.
It is a joy. Yes, because we're both in the Northern Hemisphere and we've both had weather, over the few months. And it's blue skies out there, everything. All the oak tree leaves are starting to unfurl from their buds. And it's just stunning. In Cornwall, the landscape is so alive and it's so vibrant. Everywhere you go, you're in nature. There's no separation, just literally everywhere here. And you drive along a country lane and you have these ancient Cornish hedges made out of stone, and you have everything growing in the hedgerows there. You have the bluebells, you have the garlic, the wild garlic. There's so much to forage, there's so much to appreciate on a sensory basis, and just the abundance of nature is everywhere. So yes, it's beautiful here. So I feel very lucky to be alive right now.
Yes, it is. It is magical, although it's feeling like 20 degrees today here in New York. After having like spring weather and being without a jacket, now all of a sudden, yeah, it's pretty cold, but it is lovely. It's a lovely time of year. Now you're talking about Cornwall, and of course I have a little knowledge about Cornwall, and recently have joined more dowsing groups on Facebook, and really enjoying reading posts. Cornwall seems to be a hotbed for standing stones and really like mystical, sacred spaces. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. It's got it's got a really special atmosphere here. It's so different to the rest of England in that it has its own flag. So every other county in England is a county, it's a shire, like the Shire in The Hobbit, it's that kind of feel with different counties around. Yet Cornwall feels like a land of its own somehow. It never lost that connection to the mystical and the magical. There's a strong Celtic lineage. People are very connected with the rhythms and the cycles of the land, with the Celtic wheel. So, you'll have people saying, Yuletide instead of Merry Christmas, have a good Yuletide. And it's so connected with the seasons here. There's so many sacred sites that never lost their magic. They, some of them, you've got stones tumbled down here or there, but it's so abundant with the sacred sites and the power of the Michael and the Mary energy lines that they come in at land, they hit the land at the sort of southwest tip of Cornwall. It's a land in the shape of a dragon's head, and I am very in love with dragons on every level. So when you look at the land, it's a peninsula itself, so it's got so much beautiful light, and the seas all around, the wild coast. So apparently Cornwall's like the coast of California. So it's a similar sort of landscape with that magic and wild and big seas, but also beautiful beaches. So that's what I've heard. I haven't been to California, but I've read that in a biography. That there's also an abundance of holy wells. I think there's something like a few hundred. I don't know the exact 400 or something, incredible. And those are the ones that are still known about rather than overgrown or stuff. And they are tended. So you have well dressing here and there, and you have a real connection to that, let's say, the divine feminine, the goddess energy. That Bodmin Moor is incredible. Bodmin Moor is just up the road from me, and it's the landscape of the goddess as well. They have this pool on not a high point, but fairly high on Bodmin Moor. But Bodmin Moor is like Dartmoor or moorland, where you have that wild, windswept, sort of stark landscape. So you have big, gnarly sort of tors with big chunks of granite on top, and you can see the formation from the glacial sort of landscape, and you have the sort of really strong hawthorns that kind of grow despite the wind, and the gorse bushes that are spiky and kind of gnarly sort of plants there, and really tough ponies with their I don't know what you call them, hide pelt, whatever, the hair on them. It is really long. It's about sort of 5-6 inches, or is there about 15-20 centimeters long. It's incredible. So on Bodmin Moor, you have a pool called Dosmary Pool. You have these really unusual words, and Cornwall has its own language as well, and it's a protected language. So see, there's quite a few differences compared to the rest of England. So Dosmary Pool is a pool associated with the Lady of the Lake, the mystical Avalon sort of sense. And you also have in North Cornwall, you have Tintagel, which reputedly was a connection with King Arthur, Merlin's Cave. And so you have Merlin and Morgana energy lines coming from Tintagel. So if you're into myth, folklore, history, archaeology, the sacred landscape, the sort of rhythms and seasons, you kind of do well here. The other thing that's really interesting about Cornwall is it's one of the hotspots in the UK for people who live here to go on holiday. And it's really interesting watching how people feel when they arrive. You can see as soon as they cross the River Tamar on this majestic bridge, they're in Cornwall, they seem to just have the weight sort of shift off their shoulders, and you get a sense of that feeling of space and I'm home, that safety, a bit like again back to Tolkien, when people went into, the elves went to the sort of elven lands off at the sea, they were kind of going westerly. So Cornwall's on the southwest tip of the UK, and so you get that feeling of going home and driving into the sunset when you're coming down here. And people just don't want to go home. And a lot of people dream about somehow making it work so they can live down here. So it's one of those places that touches people. You see people drop their, armored sort of, selves. People aren't masked here in any way. What you see is what you get. And it's a very gentle pace of life. And nobody's trying to be better than the next person. It's just calm. So yeah, there's something special, and the water's really great as well. So with all the heli wells. Right? So yeah, lots of things I'm, as you can probably hear, passionate about with this landscape. It's so sacred.
Absolutely. I had another person that is temporarily living or temporarily was living in Cornwall for a few years, and she just said the pace is slow.
Mm-hmm.
And, everything that you just said, it was like, relax,
Mm-hmm.
drop everything.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't happen today, maybe tomorrow, just a very calm, really probably the more normal way to live. And we're used to in this modern world. So
Absolutely.
I felt myself just really calm down, and hopefully the listeners did too. So I'm really curious. Is this where you grew up?
No,
Oh.
I didn't. I grew up on the outskirts of London, southwest of London. If anyone's seen Ted Lasso, and a place that his story is based on, Apple Plus, I think it's called. He's based in Richmond, so Richmond upon Thames. So it's on the River Thames, and I grew up really close to that river and got a sense of Old Father Thames and the magic of the river, how cleansing and nurturing it was, sort of gently powerful, like with a tenderness to it. And I used to row on the River Thames, did a marathon sort of rowing race with my father. So, and I if I could have, I would have lived on that river. So my first choice for buying the first place was actually a houseboat. And I would still live on the water. I love the water so much. So I just really noticed, even when you go into London and the energy, it can be energizing. It can be exciting. It can be almost kind of fizzy. And London, with the lie of the land, it kind of tends to draw towards it people who are there to, the streets paved with gold, the story of Dick Whittington with his cat. People want to make something of their lives if they're drawn to London. And I feel, from a feng shui point of view, it's got a similar land sort of sensibility as Hong Kong might have, where it draws lots of wealth to it, lots of, busy energies. So it can feel enlivening, yet at the same time, it can be draining, the energy there. So a bit like if you were living on a powerful energy line, it would be like, whoa, something's cooking. Yet also it might be a bit much for the system. That same kind of feel. I don't know if you've been to Hong Kong. I haven't been there, but I get the impression somehow on some subtle energy level.
I mean, I worked in New York City for many, many years in Manhattan. And I get that same sense there. It's surrounded by water. There's a lot of opportunity, we say in feng shui, when you're surrounded by water.
Yeah.
There's a lot of energy being drawn there. And
Yeah.
it's exciting, but you do need to have that downtime. You do need to have that rest, because our bodies are not meant to be in that heightened level of energy. Like you said, absolutely, like living on a power line, an energetic power line. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting sort of remembering Richmond and growing up around there with being so close to that river, and how lovely and beautiful it is. And that I felt so lucky where I grew up, because you could get into London in sort of roughly half an hour, 45 minutes into, where it's all at, and into Soho, into the really cool, amazing spots, really creative stuff going on, especially with theatre and opera, dance, and all the art scene is just great. Yet I lived on the outskirts, where it was surrounded by beautiful royal parks. So you had parkland for miles and miles in all sorts of directions, with deer in, and it was the ancient sort of hunting landscape. And later on, I used to live near Windsor Castle just before we moved down here. and that same kind of ancient parkland with 1,000-year-old oak trees. And I just remember climbing inside sort of dead trees and just having that imagination, sort of, a bit like the fairy tales where things, magical to do with trees. Like I always wanted to find a door at the bottom that I could go down underground. And, there's those sort of really sort of special energies. So yeah, although, you asked me, did I come from here? My stepfather was from Cornwall, from a place called Mevagissey, and it's a seaside fishing village. And the fishing villages on the south coast, I don't know the ones on the north coast so much, but they're just beautiful. If you were to look at a picture postcard of a sort of whitewashed, cute stone cottages with walls, really thick walls, cute little windows, down cobbled streets where cars can't go. That's basically describing lots of the fishing villages along here. The fishing villages are incredibly beautiful. And so I remember coming down as a child. We came here for holidays, exploring about that, the mystical landscape, places you just don't see in the everyday life. We went to this amazing piece of land. So there were some friends. I don't remember their name. They were, parents' friends. And they had this land. It was really beautiful. And on the land, there was something called a fogou. And it only exists in Cornwall, a fogou. So it's Fogou as a way to spell it. And I was really into exploring and sort of, wandering around on this land. It was a lovely feel, no matter what, I was 12 when I explored this thing called a fogou. Best way I can describe it is like, in case people are aware in earth energies or, sacred sites of long barrows. So it's like a mound that's long on the earth that you can kind of walk down into. So it feels like walking into the womb of the Mother Earth a little bit. So you have this sort of earth sort of floor. You might have, well, in this fogou, there was sort of chambers off to the side. So, could it have been a burial chamber? What did they use this sacred site for? And it was a bit like an initial awakening moment, Maureen, where you get a sense that, why is this here? Why does it feel this way? What did the ancients feel, believe, think about? What were they doing in this space? It's so otherworldly. And when you go deep into this place and you're wondering, are there any bones? Am I going to be like an archaeologist and discover things? And so you feel a bit intrepid as a little 12-year-old girl and just into this dark place. And it really made me cultivate a sense of wonder and awe, being in this really special space and feeling something that maybe I couldn't name at the time, but I knew how it felt, that sense of mystery, mystical, and that connection with our ancestors. Something I love about the cultures in the Far East are the connection with the ancestors, the reverence, the honoring, the integration, of how to, learn from our mothers and fathers from, all the way back. And we carry their energy in us, their frequency, that the DNA strands that are woven through our being, and the lineage. It's just so powerful that it never ends, And we come round and do this dance, and then do another dance with another soul group, and we're coming round doing this play on the stage of life, and so that sort of ancestor sort of connection, we don't get taught about that in school, right? We learn, on historical fact number 1, that battle happened there, and that
Battles.
general was doing that stuff there. I want to know about, how do people live? How did it feel to be there? I don't know if you've ever been camping in a tent. Going on a campsite, I really felt the first time I took my kids to a campsite, they just sprung out of bed. Everyone slept pretty well, you just have all the nature sounds there. in the morning, they were so fresh and alive and just getting out the tent, pottering about, playing in front of the tent. And there were some other tents around, not literally in a circle, but it was similar. And I felt that sense of, wow, how must it have been like for our ancestors, let's say the Iron Age, where people just gently kept an eye on each other's offspring. There was that sense of safety and connection. And I noticed my kids just over a weekend camping when they were just, under 10 years old, they came out of that experience standing taller. They felt more confident because they got a taste of freedom. They could be around, playing with sticks and digging, making mud pies or whatever they're doing. They had that sense of autonomy, whereas there's a lot of stage management for kids and lives in that, let's say, their modern day-to-day ways of living. And also there are concerns for safety and there's lots of stories about how awful things happen. So you can understand how people are alert and aware. And so just going through that fogou experience and at the same time Indiana Jones and all of those films were coming out, just that sense of wonder and being a bit of an explorer, I think started me on my journey. It's just a magical moment. So I'm really glad to be back here. I didn't plan it, but it happened anyway.
Oh, okay, Alex. Yes. So if you wouldn't mind just playing a little, and I'm sure you appreciate that, maybe just close your eyes and just bring us back to that 12-year-old Alex who is entering into this space or exploring.
Yeah. So there's an opening there and it looks untouched. And what is there? Walking down into somewhere without any light. The earth you can smell. There's a stone lintel across the top. And it's a half buried, who knows what it is. And walking down and down into this underground building, but who knows what to call it. It's not like any building you've seen. It's made from mud and stone, and there are openings off a long corridor of mud and stone. And these openings off to each side are square or rectangular with stone, and you can see in either side. But can you make out what's in there? They're sort of like little rooms, but they're very low. They're not rooms you could stand up in. You could crawl on your hands and knees through each entrance and explore. Why did they exist? Wondering what people did in this space. You feel, even though it's dark, it feels safe. It feels like it could potentially be scary, but somehow you feel okay. Going down and down into the deeper part of this fogou.
I'm curious, sense-wise, did you smell, maybe taste, hear? What was the quality of the sound?
The earth was the sense, the smell of the earth. It wasn't damp, it wasn't dry, it just was. And you could feel that somehow that comforting smell of the earth and the acoustics. It was somehow just so quiet. And the sound of your breath, it kind of gets absorbed by the mud, the earth all around you. There's some dead leaves down there, crispy dead leaves that must have blown in. I get a sense of autumn. And when you're deeper in the fogou, you can look out from this low passageway and see the chink of light at the end. It's a beautiful contrast. And you're safe, you're held in the land, literally enveloped in the land, but in a safe way. In a sacred way somehow.
There's magic when we recount our stories, and sometimes more layers come out as we consider it after we actually voice it or write it down. I know personally, and I think 10, 11, 12, that, puberty time or prepubescent time is such a rich time for these stories, because so many people I've interviewed go back to that age and having an experience that opened up their young minds to something so much deeper than what we're taught.
Yes, absolutely. And funnily enough, I was having a conversation just a few days ago with somebody on this same topic, and they're in Canada actually, and work with earth energy, and we were talking about this age 12 kind of awakening, and he had the same kind of experience. Funnily enough, he came with his family to England and was in Glastonbury and went round, Avebury, and it was with a quite holistic travel company called Astral Travel, which I loved.
Talking about Lux Lingen,
Yes.
also shared that story on this podcast. I'll put a link below.
Oh, brilliant! Yes, and we were just saying about this 12-year-old stage. If you think about the developmental sort of energies, when, according to the chakra system, at least, 0 to 3 as the base chakra, it's foundational, safety, love, home, warmth, etc. Sacral, it's like age 3 to 6. It's about, emotions and it's creativity, expressing. And when you're at the solar plexus at 7 to 10, you start to sort of question, that's right, that's wrong, that's true, that's false. And it's a little bit more black and white, and also the establishing of like, I'm me. I'm not just toddling around going bumble bumble, in play and sort of a bit of school. And then when you're at that next stage, I actually hadn't thought about the chakra stage, but yes, you're moving into the heart. And the heart is the transitional chakra, where it's not just about me, myself, I. It's more, why am I? Oh, how am I? And why am I here? And I think there's that little voice within that maybe just starts to make itself heard a little bit more. The inner world, the alchemical sort of, massive cosmos of, our inner space. It's maybe about that. That little voice starts to make itself known, and you start to hear questions or ask yourself questions about, what is my life about? Why am I here? Who am I? Why am I? And those are really big questions that we can often spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out.
Yes. And perhaps it is some knowing from our higher selves of our purpose here, and it's just like the inkling of that.
Yes.
The door opens.
Yes.
Are we brave enough to walk through? I mean, I'm just thinking of myself at that age. doing what you just shared. And I'm like, I don't know if I would have done that in the well, it was not daytime, I know, but so dark and all alone. And I might have been, I might have entered, but then I might have turned away. I'm not sure if I would have been brave enough. Wow. There's something that really pulled you there.
Yeah.
And it was, would you say an initiation for you?
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't have thought about sacred, you know, sacred land, standing stones. And because of that feeling I got, it's been a bit of a quest ever since to try and understand why, how, our ancestors built these amazing places that still stand today. And I remember with my dowsing rods, much later on, I was down back in Cornwall, funnily enough, near St. Ives, which is a beautiful town full of amazing art because it's got a double peninsula, so the light is just bouncing off every which way, and it's illuminating. It's luminescent and illuminating there. The light is absolutely the best. And just a little bit along and a little bit inland from there was this beautiful big standing stone. So I was always a bit of a stone seeker, let's say, just looking around. But this was the first time I actually remember. So in my early 20s, I had my dowsing rods, and I walked up to this big menhir, you would call it, the big standing stone. So I don't know if you had Asterix and Obelisk cartoon sort of books in the US, and there's this big character that's carrying a big sort of menhir stone on the back of him. So these big standing stones. It's a French cartoon, but it was translated. Anyway, going up to this stone, I felt for the very first time with my dowsing rods. So they're sort of L-shaped rods, and you hold them in your hand. And I just went straight up to this big stone, and my rods moved as I got closer to the stone, and I could feel through the copper rods. I could feel the energy coming off the stone, and it kind of pushed my rods towards themselves. And I'd never experienced that before. So I could detect, let's say, the energy field around the stone, and I got a sense of the consciousness. So some people are aware of animism and consciousness being in all living things, and I got a sense of the wisdom and the wordless wisdom of this stone and what it had seen, let's say, witnessed, but also how powerful that energy was. So I couldn't put my rods closer than, let's say, just pretty much a hand's width, from the stone. I couldn't really push them through the field. So I got that real sense of magnetic repelling kind of energy. And then that took me on another exploration with stones and trees of just understanding what is their energy field. If you interact and you sort of beam love from your heart, your loving heart, how does that change the field? And it really expands it mightily. It's quite beautiful to douse that. So yes, you can keep on finding out through this starting point. Where does it take you? It's your hero's journey. It's magical.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, around 12, you had this experience and the fogou, and then in your 20s, you had that experience with the menhir.
Yeah.
Where did you pick up dowsing rods? Like, what was that influence on you?
It's interesting. I was at when I was a teenager, so funny enough, from age 12 to 16, I was at a boarding school on the south coast of England. And one day, I think I was about 13 or 14, somebody said, "Oh, you can ask questions with a pendulum." And it's sort of yes, no sort of questions. And I think it was just a necklace with a pendant, and I picked it up and it worked. And I was like, wow, this is great. This is so bad. And so I just haven't stopped since then. Really, it's been such a part of my life. I just naturally felt an affinity with it, and it's like speaking an inner language. It's the way I describe dowsing is it's a bridge between realms, and you can ask questions with respect, humility, alignment, calling on grace to flow through you, heart coherence, grounded, making sure your microcosmic orbit is flowing the right way, um, ensuring your field is clear from any interlopers, and, non-beneficial energies, let's say, and it's just developed and iterated from there. So I always wanted to study dowsing, so I found somebody to teach me around that time through adult college. So you can just sign up for a class, and I just found one in Richmond, where I learned from a feng shui specialist. So yes, so the sense of space, environment, and design and harmony has always been really close to how I think, feel, act. Just seeing, let's say, a cathedral of trees and seeing how beautiful they are. And that picture on your Enchanted Earth book is just so evocative of that. The majesty, the symphony of the sounds with the gentle breeze rustling the leaves. And it's just so beautiful, soothing, and connecting. Some of the most profound experiences I've had have been in a tree temple sort of complex, if you like. So yeah, it's just an ongoing journey of discovery with dowsing rods, pendulums, using my body as a dowsing tool, a bit like a kinesiologist might. And your body knows. You're just using a dowsing rod to help show the antenna direction of, yes, no, when you're tuning into consciousness event, So but the dowsing rods are amazing, I find, for being out in the field, for finding earth energies, for finding hotspots of beautiful spirals like vortices of energy. And, I'm not a dowser in that practical dowsing sense where I go and find water or, go and I can work with geopathic stress and I understand how it is, but I'm much more interested in finding the special and nurturing energies, the earth energies, the mystical side, reconnecting us to our true roots and living in alignment with the nature beings, the elemental world. That sense of joy and delight from my childhood books of Noddy and Big Ears by Blyton with that little gnome. So I'm a big fan of gnomes, and I've mentioned dragons, fairies, the little people under the hill. Just that unseen, hidden to most of us, but very magical otherly world, the interdimensional space where we can connect with those energies, whether we see, feel, sense, hear those energies, and how we can support each other, how we can work as teammates, if you like. So yeah.
I love everything you just said, and yeah, I am with you completely, 100%. I went through my path of dowsing was really focused on the geopathic stress, and I was introduced to it also in my feng shui training, and
Okay.
really loved it. But it was all about improving health, physical health, and then I started shifting into more metaphysical health. And that's where I find myself now. And my focus is also very aligned with you. I think we're at a real important time in humanity where we have this opportunity to help others awaken to the beauty and to the unseen, which is just as present as what we can see.
Yes, I would so concur. And I love the name of your business, Luminous Spaces. I find that so uplifting and beautiful. And it's kind of transcendental somehow because it's so expansive. The feeling behind the name that you've gathered to represent what you share with the world. And
Thank you.
there's something I read in a dowsing magazine years ago that really struck me. And it really sat well with me. And it was somebody who was working with earth energies to help balance and because you need to do this really gently and in a considered way. And she was saying that if you look at dowsers who work with geopathic stress, quite a number of them have, let's say, shorter lives than you would expect. And there is the possibility that by going and working on the worst energies, you're standing in or near these energies that are, not life supporting, let's say. And so she said, why don't we just look for where things are abundant and joyful and try and grow that instead? And yeah, it's like that's a fifth dimensional unity consciousness sort of lens, right? And which is beautiful, because why fix things that seem broken? Why not let them just kind of ebb and flow and dissolve in the way they need to for that, and harmonize? Because the earth's an intelligent being. We don't need to think in our thinky heads that we need to sort of march in and fix everything. It's not necessarily our job, or do we even have permission to do that? If I do work with earth energies that are maybe a little bit, let's say, it needing a bit of support or harmonizing or balancing in some way, I find increasingly the best way is with beaming love out of the heart space. And it's just, we don't need to, necessarily do earth acupuncture anymore. Earlier in my studies, that was more the thing. But I don't get a sense that we need that so much now. I feel like it's with intention, with blessings, with grace, with harmony, love, and light. That's the way forward. And how can we co-create with those excuse me, beautiful energies to elevate, and we both expand. We both have that uplifting feeling. And it's not hard work, is it? It's not fixing broken stuff. It's actually harmonizing and being connected and appreciating. So it's a bit more fun.
So well said, Alex. Really, just like a wonderful wrap up, I think, to our conversation today. I can't believe it's almost been an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things I wanted to ask you about. I mean, I'm going to ask you. We don't have to go too deep if you don't want, but dragons.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I could quite happily, be here in 24 hours and still be exploring dragon energies and the mystical, the magical, the alchemical, the symbolic. I'm a big fan of symbols, the language of the soul, the subconscious. And I'm also a fan of, if you get an idea or a bit of inspiration drop into your awareness, why not follow that thread? It's a thread of consciousness. What are we going to weave into it? What fabric is it going to become? And so my sort of breadcrumb trail of delight has been with earth energies, in particular, the past five or maybe 8 years has been about labyrinths. And I was instructed, let's say, from upstairs, to go and build a labyrinth in the end of my garden. And I did. It was just raked leaves and earth, in this circle of beautiful Scots pine trees. And it even had a doorway of 2 trees right next to each other that you could walk across a threshold. It was really divinely guided. It was beautiful. And on walking in the labyrinth, I saw the face of Merlin sort of energy in the Scots pine when I was at the center. I got a lot of downloads and lots of alchemical and harmonizing experiences. I learned loads more about how a labyrinth can be connected with 5 element theory and how you can get spirals of each of the elements and the seasons and the rhythms. And when you pass that point, maybe you feel like it's a bit sluggish to move past because maybe, your lung metal grief needs a bit of harmonizing. So I just started to see all these different layers coming into the labyrinth. And then I got a message in the center one day, say, this is the way dragons lie. And I was like, oh, okay. And when you look at how a labyrinth is, it is like a dragon coiled up. And literally days after I was told that, and I'd never really, I'd loved dragons, the Neverending Story, that beautiful white dragon. He's like, you want him as your friend. And so yeah, with this dragon message and sort of aha moment, epiphany, I started exploring them. And I knew about dragon lines, but this was a different thing. This felt like the consciousness of, let's say, the metaphysical sort of qualities, archetypal sort of energies to do with dragons. And it just took me on yet another odyssey. And I found dragons very protective in your field. I don't feel with the dragons that tend to work with me as supporting helpers, I don't feel the need to do all of the energy protection work because I feel them on my shoulders and they're like, don't mess with Alex. It's just, they're there. And it feels powerful and channeling and light language and all the codes seem to be accelerated with the messages I'm getting through with dragons. You can astral travel with them, flying through the sky. They have been giving me some beautiful messages about how they're coming back down to land in the earth. They're so primordial and powerful. And the messages I've been given is just with that majesty and noble presence and power. They're trying to help us remember how noble and full of majesty and sovereignty and power that we really are for this age that we're stepping into, which is more about self-sovereignty rather than being beholden to old system structures, established patterns of control and whatnot. So they're our buddies. They're so creative to work with. Like if you want to channel dragon, try drawing one. Look for them in the clouds and the skies. They're there in the hills and the lands, North Wales. Amazing. So they're here with us. Another writer said about dragons that the fairies are the elemental beings for growing intelligences like plants. The gnomic kingdom is to help with structural intelligences like stones, rock, crystals, earth. And the elves are to do with the trees. And maybe the dragons are the elemental beings for humans. Yeah. So that sat with me really nicely. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was a good insight. And, if it sits with you, and let's see where they take you. Dragons are back, unicorns have been around on kids' backpacks, We're getting our magical, mystical friends back in our collective consciousness, I feel.
And our galactic kin, too.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Draco, the dragon constellation. So, yeah, keep on seeking, looking out there at the sky and stars inside in our stellar internal world. It's so beautiful, this journey, isn't it?
It is. It is. I feel so fortunate to feel excited and passionate about what I do, because I know there's many people out there that don't feel that sense of belonging or at all a sense of excitement for our future. But it is there. If that's one of you, just, watch some of these episodes. You're going to see a lot of love and light and a lot of a sense of excitement for our future, because we are moving into amazing time for humanity. Just have to keep grounded.
Yes. The shimmering gold of
center.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that shimmering gold like you get in the leaves and the light. It's there to reflect back for us that all is well, all shall be well.
Oh, Alex, it's been such a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Maureen. What a wonderful host you are. And, it's you're lovely the way you hold space, and very creative as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And for all of you watching, if you enjoyed this, please like, share, and comment. I will respond to your comments, and I hope you have an enchanted day.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.